Hi, everybody. So this is my weekly live stream video via StreamYard, and I hope that the audio is okay. There's some construction going on outside, which actually really impedes the video. But it's a beautiful day in Kathmandu. It's sunny. It's really it just feels nice. It's been kind of cold the last couple of days, so I feel like the sun being out kind of brings a very bright vibe, like a bright feeling. But so plans changed for me, and I'm kind of just embracing the messy hair apartment in Kathmandu thing going on. But I have the inspiration to talk about change. So when change happens, and a big part about me is that I like to stay positive, I like to stay focused. One of my, I think, number one attributes that is responsible for my success would definitely be the fact that I adapt well to change and failure. So in many ways, if I fail to be somewhere or am late or don't manage to complete something like literally like homework or like something in school, I wouldn't let it affect my self-esteem. I remember one time I was in 5th grade and I was in Mr. Murphy's math class and I didn't do a homework assignment. And I remember him telling me in front of everybody, then you get a 0. And that was the first time I'd ever gotten a 0 in my life. And I cried in class, couldn't help it, just started crying. And I remember thinking, I know why I didn't do my homework. My parents were fighting. I was fighting with my parents. I completely forgot about it. It was the first time I recognized that trauma and dysfunction in the home can lead to memory loss and can lead to lack of focus and severe forms of procrastination. And I realized that was going to be a pattern in my life. In 5th grade, I knew it. I was like, okay, this is going to be a pattern and there's no way I can get around it. I got a 0 now and I'm probably going to forget homework again because you know what? I'm not dead, right? Like I made it. I survived my first 0. So, you know, what's to say that in middle school I'm not going to get 0s also? But that doesn't change who I am. And that's a big part of what I've stayed consistent in my whole life, which is that like material success, emotional states, these don't define who I am. Who I am is much deeper than that. And there was an incident when I was 8 years old, I started crying and I was in a car and I was driving and I always had these moments in the car where I kind of had these breaking of the fourth wall kind of moments where I would kind of look around and say, wow, this is a city. There's all these buildings. This is what forms my reality while I'm going down the road. But this isn't what actually the land looks like. Before all of this construction and development, it would have been like forests. I would try to imagine what the city of Atlanta looked like without like all the buildings and everything. So I was kind of trying to break away from what the mind was experiencing. I would sit in my room in the dark at night trying to break through this barrier, what my mind could perceive, what I could experience. It was limited to this experience of the brain and the body and the self, but then all of a sudden I'd have this feeling where it would transcend feeling altogether. And it felt good. And it was like, you know what, this is the true state for me. This state it is almost timeless. It feels impersonal, but at the same time, it feels very personal. So I would try to lucid dream about it. I would try to have dreams about it. Mostly, I couldn't reach that state until I was in a state between sleep and wakefulness. But at the same time, I'd also reach that state when I was traveling at high speed, in a car, for instance, or in a plane. And I noticed that a lot of times when I had these sort of revelations, breakthroughs, whatever you'd call it, I'd be traveling or in my room in the dark at night. So what I focused on a lot was who the self was, what my experience was, and how I shared that with the world around me. So one time I was 8 years old, I was crying, and I realized that Kind of similar to how I got that 0. Okay, well, life is sadness sometimes. Sometimes you're sad. Sometimes, you get upset. But this isn't who you are all the time. This doesn't define your life. Your life isn't bad. This is what I was telling myself. I was counting on my little fingers how many ways my life was difficult. And instead of staying in this, something triggered. It was a positive response. I was like, wait a minute. This is just, your personality speaking, but you're not always going to be sad. And at the same time, why you're sad doesn't define you. It's not your fault. Your response to what is making you sad is within your control. So I settled down for a moment, and I was thinking, and you know how it is when you're crying, your mind starts flowing, you start kind of coming up with ideas and thinking things through, having these breakthroughs. Well, I had this personal breakthrough in my psyche, which was, I'm crying now, and I've told this story so many times. Sometimes it just gets a little redundant, but I'm going to do it again. Because when I realized it for myself, I started talking about it. I didn't realize it until I was about 21 years old, 20 years old, 19 maybe. No, I was about 18, 19. When I realized why this memory was so important. My friend was talking about fear of death, and God rest his soul. We were having this conversation about death, and he was very afraid. He actually even started crying in front of me, thinking about his family and his friends dying or him dying. And I started crying too. But I was like, and I couldn't put this into words, but I was like, you don't have to be sad. There's no reason to be sad. For instance, in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 2, it says, Arjuna, while speaking learned words, you are mourning what is not worthy of grief. The wise man does not lament the living nor the dead. Arjuna was so upset and so sad because he had to go to war, and he didn't want to commit all of this genocide, all of this patricide, killing his cousins and brothers and uncles and stuff, who were great warriors and generals. So he felt devastated. And Krishna told him, you have no reason to feel devastated because the nature of the soul. If you understand the nature of the soul and their relationship with me as the divine, then you will not mourn for the living nor the dead. Even though, Arjuna, you're speaking learned words, you're speaking like an intelligent Brahmin, you're speaking like someone who cares and has compassion about the lives of others and about your own integrity and your own spiritual growth, you're actually speaking out of ignorance and out of goodness, and you're passionate about it. You're speaking out of these modes of the material world because you are ignorant or forgetful of your nature with me, your relationship with the soul. So instead of defining what we're sad or we're happy about, lamenting and mourning, forgetting and understanding the relationship between God is the pinnacle between understanding the self. If you understand your relationship with the eternal, with the consciousness, the consistency of the consciousness within the self, well, then you don't have any reason to be lamentful, nor do you have any mournful, or do you have any reason to be joyful or happy. You no longer identify with the existence or the feeling, the experience of being sad or being happy, because now you have transcended the identity of self to the transcendent self or the super consciousness, the super soul, and you have it in connection with the divine. And this happens most of the time beyond our intellect. And we have these subconscious memories, these subconscious experiences where all of a sudden we experience the divine consciousness and we identify with it. We're like, okay, you know what? That's my true nature. And so in my experience, I was sad and I realized, well, you're going to be in school again and all your friends are going to be laughing and dancing and we're going to be playing on our phones and we're going to be happy again. But then it hit me again. The mind goes back and forth between the pinnacle, between the pendulum, yin and yang, I guess. You're going to be crying again. Because as an adult, I knew this statistic at 8 years old, you laugh 80% less when you're an adult. So I was like, well, shoot, now I'm never going to be happy without thinking that it's temporary. But in the same way, my sadness is temporary. So boom, it hit me. Emotions are temporary, and so is the body, because I want to be this kind, loving person my entire life. But if I want to be a kind and loving person my entire life, I have to detach myself from the body. I'm young, I'm pretty now, that brings me a lot of joy. The beauty of the sun, that brings me a lot of joy. But the truth of the matter is that a sunny day is temporary. That youth is temporary. That this body is temporary. But the experience that this body is having, that is eternal, that is consistent, and it goes on. And so before this video ends, I really want to change positions here, because apparently I was going to focus on what I'm studying right now, which I'll focus on in a little bit, which is Sanskrit. Guys, I'm writing Sanskrit. But what I'm saying, it actually seems to carry a little bit more importance for me right now than if I were to maintain focus on the study. Okay. So what I realized ultimately, it's a funny balancing game here with my phone. What I realized ultimately was that the nature of the self is neither the body nor is it the mind. The mind can experience the self, the body can experience the self, but the soul, the self, the true nature of the self, this transcends the temporary. And that was my first instance where I understood eternal consciousness. And it was just literally a defense mechanism. I was very sad. I was literally about to destroy my whole life by identifying with this dysfunction or this sadness that was happening within me, this conflict that was happening within me. So my resolution logically was to come to the understanding that the self is not suffering, nor is the self enjoying for that matter, nor does the self actually suffer death, disease, and old age. Because right after that, I would get very sick. My dad would get pneumonia, I would get the flu, and we would be sick for a couple of days. I remember crawling to the kitchen and drinking water and having this revelation again. Oh, I'm sick, but if I die, that's okay, because you already know that the nature of the self is consistent consciousness that will never die. That even if the body dies, that this self is not necessarily the body. So I realized that even though the body ages, and even though the body goes through changes and dies, the consciousness within it does not. The experience of the consciousness, this play that we're experiencing, this movie that we're all starring in, that is a part of this biblical epic, this divine comedy, as Dante would say, that we are all archetypes of. But the true personality, the supreme personality, is omnipotent, is of all qualities. It embodies all qualities. So in the same way that this omnipotent being can embody all qualities, in the same way as archetypes, we can also embody those qualities. So in one way, you can learn through your astrology, you can learn through your zodiac, you can learn through your ancestral karma, you can learn through ancestral traumas, generational traumas, and you can also learn through the light body, the Akash body. The Akashic body is connected to the realm of knowledge that transcends what we can limit ourselves to in this world. We can connect to this divine consciousness through our meditative and spiritual practices, through our mental faculties, in order to tap into this record of knowledge, of consciousness, of the self. And the self transcends this one body, this one mind, this one identity, one personality. Here, my name is said as Camila Wilson, but the fact of the matter is that I transcend this body and this mind. I transcend this personality, this archetype. But this archetype has taken my place and takes the role of Camila. Therefore, I take the role of Camila and I show consistency and I adapt to the world, which is what, of course, as a science biology major, I'm very, very interested in all the time. As a behavioral studies student, I find the most interesting thing in human adaptation is the positive mind, is the positive aspect of psychology. If you can remain positive, calm, and connected to your main focus, your goal, your intention, then you can adapt to change in a way where you can go through things that are traumatic. You can go through things that are very exciting, but not lose focus in that which you are intending to accomplish. So for instance, if you intend to accomplish school, or you intend to get a certain body type, or you intend to have a certain health standard, or you intend to do something in the world for the human race because you believe that you are an advocate for change, that you are a conduit for change in the world, well then, in order to accomplish that goal, you must remain focused and not be deterred by the negative aspect of failure or the negative aspect of this material world, which is suffering. For example, if, for instance, you have failed. For instance, going back to my experience with that number 1 0, that first 0 I ever got in school, where the teacher embarrassed me in front of everybody and I had to admit in front of all these really smart kids, because I thought I was one of the smartest kids, that now I've got a 0, that I'm not a good student. How do I come back from that? I was petrified. I was terrified. And that's when I knew that the teacher was wrong. I didn't get a 0. I just couldn't do the homework. That I understood the material well and I loved it. I loved multiplication. But in my home, I didn't have the environment to sit down all the time and do these big projects where we color in leaves, because I didn't want to sit down for that long. I didn't have that meditative quality. I didn't have the peace within my home space in order to do that. But I understood the material and I knew that. So I took compassion on myself and I related the compassion to my teacher, because I would say, well, he drinks coffee and his breath always smells like coffee, but he eats mints because he cares about his students and he doesn't want his breath to smell like coffee when he's talking to his students. So I took this place of compassion for myself and said, okay, I've gotten my first 0. I've been humiliated in front of my class, but this doesn't define me as a student. And I still want to learn. So I'm going to be here the next day. I'm not going to be a bad student. And this aspect of understanding myself, understanding my relationship with the teacher, and ultimately understanding my relationship as to the world as a student, it allowed me to continue to fail, which sounds terrible, but I didn't feel this anxiety towards completing homework. I loved experiencing class and lectures, and I loved going to school, but I didn't necessarily keep up with the homework. When I was at home, I just wanted to do my own thing. I didn't really want to interact with anybody. So I failed in many ways. I mean, I got good grades. I was like a BC student, A's in some classes, but for the most part, and I was an academic, I was in advanced placement. I was in like orchestra and advanced placement almost all the way through high school until senior year, when I was like kind of starting to detach from all that. So it's schools and study was super important to me, but at the same time, I didn't allow it to make me into this neurotic person. And if you are following my live streams, then you will know the story of when I had met the Tibetan monks. And the Tibetan monks had showed me sand mandalas, and that's kind of what we were doing with multiplication. We were making mandalas out of multiplication equations. We would have to write on a leaf, like a big cutout paper with a big circle, and we'd have to write all the multiplications in a circle, literally like an Om Mani Padme Hum Tanka. Or we would have to take like a big maple leaf for fall, for Thanksgiving, and write all the multiplications for the number 7. So you guys get it. If you remember education, elementary education in the United States at this time, then you know these practices. And so the Tibetan monks had showed me something like this, and I always thought, wow, they sit there with this little tool and they go grain by grain, and they watch every single grain fall into place, and then they put the colors, then they match the patterns. And as a child, I was baffled by this. I was like, wow, you have this patience and this ability to be able to sit for long periods of time creating these elaborate designs and these beautiful designs that you probably have had passed down to you for thousands of years. So I was inspired by the monks to do something like this. But I noticed something in the monks that I didn't notice a lot of times in those around me. But I recognized the quality in some of my fellow students and some of my teachers and my parents and myself, which was tranquility. That they did not live a neurotic lifestyle. And I wouldn't learn this until in the 2020s, until literally the year of the rat, 2020, the Lunar New Year in the spring. I happened to walk into a meditation center right down the street from the mechanic shop where I had my car being serviced, and don't have that car anymore. So it's kind of like funny how all this time I spent on this with this vehicle and all the ways that it led me on my path without actually staying with me. This material attachment didn't stay with me, but at the same time, it was a conduit. It was a catalyst for my spiritual growth, for my path, for my advancement on my spiritual path. Anyways, I went to go get French fries. At this time, I was vegetarian. I was hungry, and I saw McDonald's. I was like, I'm going to go get some French fries. It's a cheap food. It's bad for me. I know that, but at least it's vegetarian. This was during COVID. I wasn't able to go to Bhakti Urban Farm for the Friday and Wednesday conscious program for Kirtan and Prasadam. So I was like, I'm going to go get some French fries. And I wasn't eating a lot and I was spending very little money. So I didn't want to go to McDonald's. I didn't want to go. I was being compulsive, but I was like, feed the craving. And then I saw the sign, Tibetan Meditation Center of Houston. And I'd seen it before, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to walk over to the window. And even though the window is probably going to be closed because it's COVID and no one's open, all these temples are closed, I bet you money I'm going to see something that I want to see. So I get over, maybe like a sign or something. And I get over there and guys, they're open. They're open. And they're having their Chinese lunar, they're having the Spring Lunar New Year festival for the Year of the Rat, which is the year I was born in 2020. I was 20, why am I forgetting how old I was? I was 23 years old. I'm 27 now. That was 2020. I was 23 years old, which was a very special year for me. And as a coming of a woman type thing, just like becoming an adult. And they're having this ceremony. So I go in, obviously, and I've memorized some of the Tibetan Buddhist mantras, some of the longer phrases, the 12-syllable mantras. And I walk in, and the Geshe Rinpoche is sitting there, and I am like bowing and because I know the Hindu temple, so I'm like, well, it's got to be sort of similar to Hinduism, right? Because I've been studying ever since I was a child. I had this fascination with Tibet, learning about the occupation and how the Tibetan Autonomous Region is considered an extended state of the People's Republic of China. It is an occupied state of China, and there is restricted travel. You cannot travel there as a foreigner without a guide. So speaking of that, I would love to mention what happened on my journey about traveling to China, but I'll get to that in a second. This is a response to change. And so I grew up learning the history of Tibet, looking at the photos, looking at videos, things like that. So when I walked into the Guru Rinpoche sitting there, I had studied a little bit of the Mahatma letters and kind of been reawoken to samsara, nirvana, the Dharma, kind of just in an apartment, lying down in my bed with my phone on Wikipedia. So that's how that happened, and kind of like was like, oh right, this is what my spiritual journey is. And the separation of my partner and ultimately his death would be one of the deepest catalyst for my meditative experience, because when he left this world in his Mahasamadhi, I no longer had an attachment to my soulmate in this world. And that was very powerful for me, but at the same time, it was very painful. And so I realized that the nature of the soul and the nature of love is eternal, in the sense that we create the attachments to others, ultimately the attachment that we're creating to ourselves. And I connected this experience of the Guru Rinpoche to my experience of divine consciousness, and I bowed to this Guru Rinpoche as a spiritual teacher, as a spiritual master, and I read the prayers. And in assembly, I am known for speaking and asking questions and engaging in discussions. And so this is what I did. I asked about the Bodhisattva, and he seemed upset. And I was like, yeah, that wasn't really the question I wanted to ask, but I didn't feel like this was the right time. Really, what's the question I want to ask? So literally at the end of this ceremony, we're walking outside, and I approach him one more time, and I ask him, Guru Rinpoche, his name is Guru Gyatsen Rinpoche, who was Geshe Rinpoche? His name Geshe Gyatsen Rinpoche. I said, who were these Tibetan monks in the early 2000s in Atlanta, Georgia? They were playing basketball. You know, who were they and where are they from? They were from most likely Nepal or like Tibet. They were refugees from Nepal or Tibet. They were Tibetan Buddhist refugees, either born in Nepal or born in Tibet, and managed to escape Tibet and move to the United States. And my parents later filled me in after I told them this experience about the Tibetan Meditation Center, that they were playing basketball. So I would see them walking up and down the road of our neighborhood wearing orange robes or black basketball shorts, and they would always be dribbling the basketball, and they were always smiling, always very friendly, very kind, but also something very subtle about them, which wasn't necessarily sadness, but it wasn't necessarily the excited response that I like to give in regards to like meeting people, like hi, or all these beautiful smiles and things that I thought made people happy. They were very calm, very, very composed. And I took that from them, this tranquility. Though they were kind, though they were happy, and though I knew their country was occupied, they were very calm, very tranquil. And I took this quality for myself. I was like, oh, that's a good way to be in life. So I later learned they were playing basketball at the YMCA and that they were also biology students at the Emory University. The Geshe looked at me for a second. He looked down. He said, Emory University. And I said, yes, sir, Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm just raking my brain for what Emory is. And I knew Emory was a university, but I was like, yeah, Emory is a university in Atlanta. And he said they were students of biology. And so this kind of was really cool because it connected so many things in my life that I was doing to this origin of what would set me on a very spiritual path, not just at being born into this life and into this body, this soul in this body, but at the same time being given this direction by these young monks that would later ultimately lead me on my spiritual path. So I learned from them that tranquility, that though they were living in the United States as refugees, in a home, in an ashram, away from their families, they still were very kind and very compassionate, very happy. And I wanted to embody that quality. So when I found myself in extreme distress, whether I was being chastised in school because I was caught with another girl, she was bullying this kid and I started laughing with her, I was like, no, I don't want to be that person because of the monks and the robes that they wear. I was maybe 10 when that happened, 9 or 10. And then, of course, this experience I had in the car where I would recognize the connection between me and other people just through looking at them, the light that comes from our eyes and the power that comes from making connections with others. This is an experience of the divine consciousness and the interconnect and the universal connectivity of all things, the unified field of consciousness, the universal connectivity of all of reality. And we can understand that on a personal level. We can understand that on an intrinsic, intuitive level. And I was experiencing this at a young age. And so when my friend was experiencing this fear of death and separation, I was like, but wait, there's something, we'll have the rest of our lives to talk about this, is what I thought. So I didn't say much, but the memory came back. I thought, no, wait. In the same way that there's no reason to be afraid when I saved my friend's life, there's no reason to be afraid now for you. You have no reason to feel afraid of death. You have no reason to be afraid and live in this fear, because out of that is an ignorance of not knowing the true nature of the consciousness, the true nature of the soul, which transcends the body and the mind. When I was 11 years old, my friend started drowning in the pool and she dragged me at the bottom. And instead of panicking and responding to it in panic and not saving her, no fear. I understood immediately. Oh, she needs to be saved. I can swim. This is my job. This is what I'm here for. I'm here in this present moment to save my friend. And I pulled her out of the water. And I've had this experience where this light turned into the face of my mother, and I saw her cheeks and it said, you have to make it. You simply have no choice. And it reminds me of the mantra, Om Bhur-bhuva Swaha Tat Savitu Mahenyam Bhargo Devasya Demahi Dayo Yona Prachadayat, which is an ode, a prayer, an obeisance to the Divine Mother, the Mother of the Vedas, the divine consciousness that brought forth all of the universe, all of reality, our Divine Mother. I saw my mother's face in the sunlight and she said, you have to make it. You simply have no choice. And I did. I saved my friend. I had no fear. I was not afraid. At the whole time, I knew that I was just playing in an act, and that the consciousness within me is the true divine reality, is the true divine consciousness, the true divine entity that exists. And that Camila, this role that I play, this Camila Wilson, is just an actor in a play that is being set forth by the divine creator, by the consciousness, by the divine consciousness. And I love and hold reverence to the experience that I am allowed to have. I feel it is a gift. So I live in this perpetual state of positivity because of this understanding. And I've dedicated my life now to personally understanding God. But this understanding transcended language, transcended intellect, transcended learning, because it was something that I remembered and was awoken to as a child, before and without any training, just through experiencing life and experiencing the world around me. So I adapt very well. And I've come to the conclusion that I adapt even to death. I've adapted well to life, and I've adapted well to the fact that life is temporary. So in the same way that I've adapted to this nature of the temporary, I understand the nature of the material modes. I want to understand myself as a divine consciousness. I want to understand myself as the servant of God, as an extension, an archetype of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so all of my life is dedicated to this one path. And when things change in my life, sometimes things in my material world, in my life, seem to be disorganized or stagnant or chaotic. But ultimately, within the center of all of that is this understanding, this tranquility, and this peace, knowing the true nature of my soul, the true nature of the soul. And so, for instance, today's live stream is dedicated to change and the response to change. Well, because Tibet is an autonomous region of China, I realized too late, because I didn't do the research soon enough, that I would need to have hired a guide, a tour guide, specifically a tour guide, but it's not just for cultural arts. It's absolutely to control what you see and what you learn and who you speak to and how you speak to them, by the government of China. So I would have had to pay $300 to $400 in order to hire a Tibetan tour guide to go to Lhasa. But my friend told me that it's possible that I might be able to go through Sichuan. So I'm still in the application process, but I didn't make it in time to teach this young student. Luckily for me, there's this beautiful woman that lives here in this hostel, and she is fluent in Chinese. She's from New York, so I'm going to hit her up. I'm going to ask her if she wants to translate the book for me. If not, I have some friends that I want to ask, but the translation of hi ni hi ni hao mi hi is still going to happen. And even though I am upset that I cannot make it to this family, I was very excited to meet their family and travel with them for the new year. At the same time, I'm okay with accepting that this is the plan. This is what it's meant to be. I could feel it in my heart, a hesitation, not wanting to really immerse myself into this personal family. But really, I do want to experience the culture of China and Tibet, and I want to see it for myself and have that personal experience. So when things happen like this, where your plans change, let's say you've been publicating it, you're sharing your plans publicly like I am, then you kind of have to really adapt to change in the sense that it doesn't knock you off the rocker. You have to have the confidence in yourself to say, you know what, plans change, and yeah, it's because maybe I didn't schedule properly, maybe I wasn't wasn't following the right time plan, maybe I was procrastinating. But you know what, all that aside, those are just the ego making excuses as to why I'm still here in Kathmandu. The reason why is something that we ourselves, these minute minuscule identities, we give the reason, but ultimately the reason is much higher than our understanding, because we are a part of a plan. And when you have surrendered yourself and abandoned all things in order to live according to that plan, then you, without speaking, without words, without action, will follow through your dharmic path with no thought, with no control, because ultimately the controller is the Maheshvara. The controller of the Jiva Mukti is God, is the divine consciousness, that we are just part and parcel of the divine consciousness. Only archetypal manifestations of the supreme personality of divine consciousness, of Godhead, but at the same time we are personally in relationship with the divine consciousness, and therefore we are in personal contact, in communication at all times with our intention, with our goal, and ultimately with our purpose in life, which was given to us at birth. This purpose was given to us at birth, before birth, because if you ask me, when did you begin? It wasn't at birth. I was in my mom's womb. And it wasn't in my mom's womb because I existed during the conception of my mother and my father's union. So the question is, when did I not exist? Or when did I exist? Look at it both ways. Shakespeare said it perfectly in Hamlet. I think it was Hamlet. He said, to be or not to be. That is the question. And that's the perfect question. Because if I'm awake and I'm sentient, how can God not be? How can divine consciousness not be? The divine field of consciousness that we're all connected to, how can it not be? So with that being said, when change happens in the world, when you have a purpose in life, adapting to the change through a positive psychological mindset, through a healthy routine, through forgiveness, love, and compassion, these will help propel us forward to our true divine intentions, through our true meanings in life. And that's the secret. That's why I am the way I am. I am happy. I am positive. I believe. I'm strong because of my understanding of the nature of the soul. And I seek this knowledge only because I hope and wish to be able to translate it into words and share it with others. My whole purpose in life, from the moment I learned how to speak in conversation with, has been for this purpose. And so that's the plan. I'm going to China hopefully for the spring new year, and I want to go through Sichuan, and at the same time I really want to see Tibet. So maybe if I go in through China, I'll be able to see Tibet without having to hire a tour guide. Maybe kind of quietly across the border. Don't know, but you have to have faith. I'm still here in Kathmandu and I'm still studying. And if I don't make it to China, then chances are I will continue my journey here in Nepal for a little bit more and then make my way south towards India. So with that being said, everybody, I hope that you have a beautiful rest of your week, and I will be in contact with you. And of course, keep everything in mind. Keep everything that you believe in it and think it through. Have faith and trust in yourself and have the strength to be able to follow through with your plan, no matter the turns that it takes. Namaste. Before I end this live stream, I want to mention one more thing. Follow me on Instagram at camila.a.wilson. That's at camila.a.wilson. Or subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you are going to see these live videos pretty much every week. And of course, if you want to add me on Facebook, it's Camila Alejandra Wilson. You can send me a personal message, and I will always respond to you with anything that you're interested in doing. Keep an eye out for the Hai Mihai Niha Mihai book and for the Hai Mihai travel series. I'm very excited for it. I need to work on the transcripts, but also that and the Itchy Buddha. So there's a series of books and poems that I want to be able to publish on the blog in the near future. And if you don't know my blog, if you follow me on Instagram at camila.a.wilson, you'll find a link tree that will take you directly to the blog. And then, of course, if you follow me on Instagram, you will also see my live music. I am a producer of audiovisual content, so I'm constantly posting videos and constantly working on music, whether the digital creation is via Reels on YouTube, via Reels on Instagram, or live stream music videos. I do really want to start inviting people to speak with me on StreamYard. I think it'd be really cool. I've met some really beautiful, very interesting travelers on my journey, and I really want to share that with others. At the same time, I really want to start focusing on my music production while I'm traveling, making good recordings in the temples that I go to, in the different cities that I go to, and with the different musicians that I meet. So With that, thank you so much for following with me for the last 40 minutes. It's been really fun sharing with you a little bit about my experience, and at the same time, it's been great because these are thoughts that I have all the time that help me stay focused as a video diary sort of travel blog. And a lot of these feelings and thoughts I share with people all the time as I'm traveling on an individual level, but I love the fact that I could share this with a broader community, a wider range of people via the internet, and I look forward to all of the ways that this is going to manifest. I specifically really like the music is very interesting to me because I've been working on the same songs live now for the last maybe year and a half, but I've not gone through the process of recording them officially, only through live music streams. So one thing I'm doing right now is kind of getting my stuff together now that I no longer have any material possessions besides my phone, and I want to work on producing records, and not just for myself, but for other musicians and for possibly for ashrams and temples. There are so many beautiful ashrams and temples that would be amazing to get on record. With that, everybody, peace, love, namaste, and breaking free from that a little bit. Just many blessings to you on your journey. And I hope that this positive mindset, this strength and resilience in the face of change, in the face of the temporary, I hope that this carries with you and that you can feel the seed and seat of tranquility through the lotus heart, through the lotus mind, through the awakened being within you that is light, that is love, and that is pure conscious awareness. Thank you.